just say that Kelli Obazee in the middle here is the executive director of the Dallas Peace Center. And she is, I think, doing a great job in connecting the Peace Center with many organizations throughout the Koch is the pastor, senior pastor at Peace Mennonite Church. Is president of the Dallas Peace Center. Some of you know the Dallas Peace Center history. The Peace Mennonite Church was the founder of the Peace Center, going on 30 years now or so. So please welcome Ryan, if you will. And John Fullinwider. What shall I say? Educator and social activist, and he presently is the vice president of the Dallas Peace Center. He's won many awards, as you see here, in the area of housing and homelessness and education and legal services. So please welcome John Fullinwider. To reflect on issues of peace and justice. For example, when we take strong stands for justice, sometimes we alienate people that we want to reconcile with. And so those are sort of this sort of common issues of working for peace and justice. So they will comment on how they see that working, and then they will make some comments about what they see in the Dallas area, peace and justice areas. And when we've done that, we will have a Q&A. You're welcome to come to the microphone there, again, mine back there, and we'll have what I call a light offering. We really go easy on this. If you'd like to contribute something to the faith of the horses, we'd love for you to do that, but that's strictly up to you. So without further ado, we'll hand it over to the panel and they'll get started. There.
Well, good evening. As I was thinking about this topic, I just think it's important for us to get a good grasp on what peacemaking is. I think quite too often that's a term that gets thrown around by everyone because we all want peace, but we really don't know what peacemaking is. And I think that's one of our biggest challenges as peacemakers. For me, who likes the term pacifist, lots of times we think that means that this thing called peacemaking is something that's passive. Even though pacifist is passive from two completely different roots and mean completely different things, that's just the stereotype and the way that our world tends to view what peacemaking is. And so, I think at the heart of it, the world just thinks that peacemaking is boring. It's something that isn't really attractive to people, and I think that's one of our main struggles as we try to make peacemaking something that is more prominent in the world we live in. They want something that is entertaining. They want the shock and all thrill, and that's what violence gives them, and they don't see that with peacemaking often. I think that's because too often we think of peacemaking as some sort of resolution of conflict, or something outside of conflict. One of my professors, he used to say this, we may all say that we want peace, but I suspect most of us would be deeply upset if we actually got it. The idea that peace might actually be achieved scares us to death, for we associate peace with rest. But we hear that rest without conflict is just another name for death. Thus we pray, like Augustine, to give us peace, but not yet. And I think that's often true in how the world sees peace, and that's the opposite, I think, of what the Dallas Peace Center understands peace to be. I think peacemaking is not seen as the resolution of conflict or the absence of conflict, but actually the encouragement of conflict. It's not a negative force. It's not the end of confusion, of tension, of war, but it's a positive force, and I think that's why we're here. That positive force is justice, goodwill, equity, and love. I mean, as somebody in the Christian tradition, and as we go through Lent, I think we see this most clearly in the life of Jesus. Jesus' life was full of conflict. As we travel through Lent to Good Friday and the cross, we see the conflict that he caused. I mean, it wasn't somebody that just brought some sort of static peace in the absence of, conflict. Everywhere he went, people wanted to kill him. People wanted him out of there. People drove him away. He couldn't stay in the city for very long because he would go to a different town, and pretty much there was nowhere for him to go at the end. Peacemaking is something that encourages conflict. Now, I'm not going to say that all conflict is good. I think what peacemaking is about is, what are the things that we need to do to inhabit conflict well? Because conflict isn't the end of it in itself. I mean, we want to bring up conflict and confrontation and something so that inside of us, violence just doesn't continue to bubble up and bubble up and bubble up until it just explodes. We want to bring reconciliation. We want it to violence ultimately is avoided. So I was thinking that I think three things, as I think about the Christian tradition, is important if we want to deal with conflict well and how we think about justice and peace. And I think the most important thing is that we have a good understanding of forgiveness. And when I look at the life of Jesus, if we don't have a good understanding of forgiveness, we're never going to understand conflict and deal with conflict well. I think the core bedrock, to me as a Christian, is that all individuals have been forgiven and are called to forgive. All of our lives revolve around this truth. And if we really take this truth at heart, it's no longer about, confronting somebody to say, well, I'm right, you're wrong, because you can't do that when you embody a position of forgiveness. It's not self-righteousness, like, look at me. No, we embody a position where we're all wrong, and we all need forgiveness, and we come out of that forgiveness to try to find truth together. And so we offer forgiveness, and we seek forgiveness. And if we take that decision, I think that radically alters how we do with conflict. And I think here, Jesus and the woman who everybody wants to stone, and Jesus tells them, who here has sinned? And the second that he brings forgiveness on the table, the whole conflict completely changes. So I think the bedrock, one thing that we need to do if we want to embody conflict well is forgiveness. The second thing is patience. I think too often, we go into something and we say we know what people want, or we know what they believe, and we don't have any patience when we deal with people. Either we want things to change, or we think we know what other people are saying, so we don't listen. We don't give a chance to be heard. We don't give a chance to actually get into the long process of dialogue and reconciliation. When we make changes too quickly, somebody always ends up getting hurt and doesn't feel like true reconciliation happens. And if you want reconciliation for everyone, you want peace for everyone, that takes a long process of trying to find a way, a common ground, and hope and love for everybody involved. And that's a long process. And if we don't take it as a long process and we don't understand patience, then we're not going to get a conflict well. And then last, I will say that friendship. Friendship, to me, is the other core virtue if we want to deal with conflict well. And I will end with a quote on friendship from Martin Luther King, Jr. It's from his article called Nonviolence and Radical Justice, which is written in 1957. Nonviolence resistance does not seek to defeat or humiliate the opponents, but to win his friendship and understanding. The nonviolent register must often express his protests through non-cooperation or boycotts. But he realizes that non-cooperation and boycotts are not the ends of themselves. They are merely a means of awakening a sense of utter shame in the opponent. The end is redemption. The end is reconciliation. The aftermath of nonviolence is the creation of a beloved community, which the aftermath of violence, though, is tragic bitterness. And so I think if you do these three things, if we really understand forgiveness, patience, and friendship, when we go in and try to bring out conflict, we can actually understand how peace and justice can go together in ways that doesn't bring violence.
What a blessing it is to have such serving this community for peace and justice. You know, we envision a world of nonviolence and peace for future generations. That is the vision of the Dallas Peace Center. And one of the beautiful things about peacemaking is we all come to the table with a little different perspective and views. And those views touches people's lives just right where they are. So I really believe that at the heart of mankind, at the heart of humanity, that we all want to live in a world that is nonviolent and peaceful. And I believe that to the point of even those who use violence out of fear and out of not having proper tools to resolve conflict constructively, that given the right tools, given the right resources, reached out in the right way, reasoned and reconciled with, can too find ways of creating a nonviolent existence. One of the things that I've been working hard at the Dallas Peace Center is building strong coalitions and working with other organizations. And we have found this to be very beneficial in our outreach and in our work for many reasons. First of all, approximately last year we noticed that there was a move in the peace and justice circle where the struggles of many were coming together to create one strong movement, cross-cutting struggles where we had labor now working with immigration, and we had other cross-cutting civil rights and as well as many other cross-cutting advocates and people working to end the war, activists working to end the war, coming together to identify what our common tenets were in these particular struggles. So here recently, we have been embarking on a project called Human Rights at Home. And people from a disabled background and doubt, as well as, like I said, immigration and workers' rights and immigration, and all of us coming together to find out what our common tenets are in creating a one movement that elevates humanity. It's a human rights movement recognizing that at the core, we all want a dignified life. And at the core, we all desire to have sustaining peace. And at the core, we all need housing and adequate foods. And so these principles are based on universality, that human rights is an inalienable right, and it should be given to all people regardless of where they come from. And on the principles of not only equality, but also equity. Also on the principle of public goods, that things that are needed for the public should remain public and not be privatized in the capital markets. There is a movement and a shift that white, brown, black, Chinese, Muslims, Christians, that we are all coming together to advocate on one particular issue, and that is human rights, and we're grateful for that. So we're trying to identify in a meeting that we had last week, what are some of the barriers of these groups coming together? And we've identified that one of the largest barriers is fear. It's frightening to partner and to work with people who are different from us, or we don't understand what their motivations are, or what it is their objectives are. But it's through constructive dialogue that we began to break down these barriers, to see really at the core of us, I believe that we all want peace. And we all want to live in a system of nonviolence. The benefit of working in these strong coalitions and having these strong collaborations is being able to leverage each other's strengths, kind of like when you're in a marriage. My husband and I are similar, but yet very different. He is very strong when it comes to reaching out and connecting with people on all different levels, regardless of their education or economic background. I am very strong in other areas, and we leverage each other's strengths, and that really is the benefit of working in these coalitions. I might have an organization that's very strong in communications, while the other might have an organization that's very strong in activism, and we work together. Now, how we bring these things together is we identify our similar mission, vision, and values. We also understand each other's motivations through dialogues. We evaluate each other's perceptions and define each other's roles and responsibilities, and then we began to make commitments to build a stronger and better world.
I knew that Kelli and Ryan would take care of the inspiration part of this panel and free me up to talk about some things that really made me uncomfortable as an activist. But first I'd like to say that it's a great honor to be in this church, to be back in this church. And I'm sure it was 20 years ago or more now, but I did used to spend some Sundays over here. And the congregation of this church is an inspiration to the whole city. And of course, Bill and Fran McInerney and Judy and Colin, Judy volunteers over there full-time for 25 years in North Alshire Ministry. All of that comes out of this church, so I'm really honored to be here. And it's also a privilege, of course, to be working with the Peace Center, Dallas's mainstay, for justice. But anyway, I want to take my text from the 22nd verse of February from the book of the New York Times here. There was a survey that they were discussing yesterday in the Times that showed that about 58% of the people asked said that the U.S. should use military force in Iran over the nuclear conflict. Only about 30% said no. And in the same survey, about 75% of the public said that we were withdrawing the troops too fast from Afghanistan. And this got me thinking about why it's so easy to assent to an invasion or a bombing or a war in our country. And I got to thinking about when I was a kid and facing the draft, and thank God I drew a high number in the lottery, I probably would have just, messed my pants, out of fear. But at that time, the government seemed to need the public quite a bit. They needed assent from the young people of the country to be drafted to go fight the war. They needed Johnson had proposed a slight surcharge on income tax to pay for the war. And at the time, there was we had quite an effort underway, the war on poverty, and you had your sort of guns and butter, what was characterized as a guns and butter debate. And you can see pretty clearly how the war was causing a little bit higher taxes and how it was causing programs to be discontinued that were widely supported at the time. And of course, Martin Luther King said that the war on poverty got shot down over the jungles of Vietnam, and it did. And then, so you had the government needed the young people to assent to the war, or at least go along with it. They needed people to realize that it cost something and that cost might involve a trade-off. And then finally, they needed some kind of moral buy-in from the public for the war. So I'll just use those three broad categories. And eventually, they weren't getting any of the three, But, okay, so if you fast forward from, say, 1973 to 2003, you have a pretty big anti-war movement internationally to stop the invasion of Iraq. And we even had quite a mobilization here in Dallas. And, but the conditions have changed quite a bit. The war party, so to speak, had learned a lesson in Vietnam, not the one that we might have wished they'd been taught. Like, how about not invading anybody? But they learned this, that if we ask very little of the public, then they'll ask very little of us. And so after 9/11, of course, the most important thing you could do was go shopping and take your tax break. So they didn't need the young people of America to submit to being coerced into the military, because the unemployment rate would take care of that, the recession would take care of that, the lack of good health benefits in the civilian world would take care of that. And then there's always a well of good-hearted young people who feel patriotic and want to do the right thing. So it's not the case that, like we used to say, what if they gave a war and nobody came? It's more like, what if they gave a war and a lot of people came for various reasons and then nobody cared? And then they didn't want to even tell really how much the war cost. So they didn't ask us for any taxes to pay for the war. So you had a situation where the only thing they needed really was a moral value, except that they didn't really need that. Because having gotten the other two things out of the way, you have a situation where the citizens, the government doesn't need the citizens to have a war. And as drone warfare develops, they don't even need the soldiers half the time. And so I think that this is at the bottom of why it's so easy when a pollster calls and says, well, you think we ought to use military force in Iran? Yeah, sure. I'm going to school. Everything's looking pretty good. I would like a better job. Yeah, sure. Good. And so the fact that this situation to me is very problematic for peace activists. Because you're not just confronted with a hostile group that's totally pro-war. It's more that we're confronted with this wall of apathy and alienation, and then the ease with which the country can go to war with really out of assets. They don't need to ask us, because most of the congressional seats are completely safe, and the war and peace is not the salient issue in an election. So, as an activist, we have to think our way around this somehow and try to break through. So, I might leave how to do that after the break. But the other chapter here concerned a local activist. I want to lift up his work a little bit. Dallas's own Gordon Gecko, the junk bond salesman from the 80s, Harold Simmons, of course, is back with a vengeance. He writes a $100,000 check to Americans for repair. He writes $100,000 to restore our future, Romney's PAC. And then after Romney's PAC tears into Gingrich, he writes Gingrich a $500,000 check for his super PAC. And all of these checks so far have added up to $14 million spent on Republican PACs in this primary season. And there's a double handful of these folks who are actually having their own election now. And I don't think Gingrich would even have won South Carolina if it hadn't been for the guy in Las Vegas who, over about a 2-month period, gave him $10 million to go do the attack against Romney. So you've already got a situation where the government can go to war without the citizens. They don't ask us. They don't declare war. They know that there's 25% of us that will go in the streets, but they don't need it. Our moral revulsion is not their concern. They don't need our assent. And you have a situation here, a growing situation, I think, where we don't even need the citizens for the elections. Because between the billionaires, they narrow the policy choices so much. I know I'm kind of slide on the inspiration side here, but I'm just to share some things that really keep me awake at night, besides trying to write a screenplay. But I find this very troubling. I know maybe others do also. But it might cause us, we don't want to fight the last war ourselves. And we need to get ahead of this somehow and try to reinvigorate our own movement in the face of this indifference and this colossal move on the part of, not forget the 1%, just talk about 20 people that are going to own every candidate out there. And so I'll stop with that, but I just thought I'd get that out there within the discussion. Maybe we could talk about ways that, at least for part of it, how we might counter some of these trends. So thank you.
The second question that you had was about, what do we see locally? And I guess I don't know what we see locally as much as when we typically think of peacemaking, lots of times that gets wrapped up in the anti-war movement. And I think one of the challenges that we have here in Dallas, and even more so as just general peacemaking, is how do we really get the habits to actually be peacemakers? Valerie Weaver-Zerger, she's Mennonite. Not too long ago, she wrote about the only time in her life where she spanked her 5-year-old son. And it was just one of those days where her head was against the wall the whole day. Nothing went right. Anger was just boiling up inside of her all day. For whatever reason, she got home and the children were just awful that day. And, she spanked him 5 times and she felt, she said she never felt worse in her life about it. And she talks about, how when you act, you do violence. It's never that you're going from 0 to 60. You're really going from 59 to 60 because you're letting all of that violence just fester inside of you. And through all of her conflict management and all of those classes that she has, when you get that far, it's almost impossible not to react to violence. So I think, personally, a big part of peacemaking is creating the habits in our own lives of weeding out those places, because violence seeps in everywhere. It's impossible for violence not to. The language that we use, almost all of it, comes from violence. The food that we eat, we can go on and on and on and on, and these are all important issues as peacemakers that we need to deal with individually. So I really think that for us, as we think about what's going on locally, it's how do we train ourselves to act peacefully in those times when it's almost impossible to act peacefully. Not so much, when there's a war going on and it's, the thing to do to respond to these peacemakers, but what do you do in those times when everything is going against your way and you just can't do anything else? It seems like the thrust out against violence. And we need to work hard in order to do that. And I think of something that the peacemaking Dallas Peace Center did in the 90s for much of the time. As a great place to start was, we had a program that's called Taffy, Toys Are for Fun, Y'all. And it was a great program. I actually think my fiancée was maybe the first Taffy bear, or she was part of it for a while. But it was a way of showing that, that not all toys don't need to be used for violence. And we struggle with this as a church, and we try to think of parenting, and kids pick up a stick and it turns into a lightsaber. Or if it turns into something that turns into a gun, it doesn't even have to be anything that's closely related to violence, but it turns into violence. And I think right there we show how much of our imagination has just been shaped in the futility by violence that runs so rampant in our culture. But that's just the way that we're trained to think from a very, very, very young age. And we need to counter that as peacemakers. And I can give one example that, from my tradition as Mennonites, that we used to do, and it's something I've shared in my congregation quite a bit. It's something that I don't know if we should do or shouldn't do, but it's what they did. Is we have this huge book of martyrs, the Mennonites in the 16th century, and thousands of people that were killed for their faith by the Catholics and the Lutherans and everything else. Just a huge mess. And so we collected the martyr stories, and some are better than others. But it used to be the tradition in the Mennonite faith that these were the bedtime stories that you told to our kids. And it might shock you, might be like, why would we do something that is so violent? It was also a way of showing them what faithfulness looks like, what peacemaking looks like. And it's a way of opening up these kids' minds to peace in a different way. I guess we can debate on if it worked or didn't work, but and that the stories aren't nearly as violent as you could think that they would be. But they saw that it starts at a very early age with the stories that we tell our kids that if we want to train them and open their imaginations, that a different world built on peace is possible. And so I think that's a challenge for me as I think about weeding out all the violence in my life. Is creating the habits that make it possible. It seems almost impossible to do so.
The One Makes a Difference program at the Dallas Peace Center teaches young people heart-mind coherence. It teaches them how to interrupt the amygdala that refers back to what their last experience of trauma, so they're living with them today, not their yesterday or their yesteryear. It teaches peer mediation, conflict resolution, and it teaches them how to be connected to their community through service learning projects and civic engagement outreach. So we're teaching from 7 to 16, as well as the curriculum, which is the Reservoir Foundation, and I did get that on my TV, John. Reservoir Foundation also teaches the same curriculum in Costa Rica, both to children and adults, and is offered at UNT Peace Studies program occasionally to student teachers. So that's how we, I think, began also as another way of teaching our young people to live in peace and creating systems of peace where we're not only teaching children, but teaching their parents, instructing their teachers, and challenging school administration on their discipline policies, which we work in a coalition to encourage the DISD to look at how discipline policies are being applied unfairly to minority and children with disabilities. So that's one way in which we are creating peace. And to John's point, what keeps me up at night, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's really the heart of activism, is as we are watching such egregious violence in Syria against its people, the countless lives that are having to live through the aftermath of Iraq, the ongoing war in Afghanistan, the crisis in Palestine. Those are the things that make me get on the phone to the Hadi Jawads, the Matt Hoes, the Leslie Harrises of the world and say, what can we do constructively to create a change? And I'm proud and privileged to be working with an organization that is pro-peace to the point of launching appropriate letter writing campaigns, or writing letters to the editor, or willing to stand out on the street, or traveling and having congressional visits and meeting with legislators. This is the work of the Dallas Peace Center at many levels, on many fronts. And I was at a meeting recently, and one of our young volunteers, Adrian, he said, well, tell us a little bit about the Dallas Peace Center. He was asked at the meeting. He says, one thing about the Dallas Peace Center is we don't discriminate. We don't have just one particular issue. We are a volunteer-driven organization which allows us to move constructively on various issues. Our volunteers who align themselves with the mission, vision, and values of the organization, we allow and create a platform of infrastructure so activism can thrive here in North Texas. And it's an honor to serve as the executive director of such an organization.
Thank you. And of course, I agree with everything that Kelli's saying. And I think that you can look in the work of this church and in the work of the Peace Center and see a way to stay on the case, even when the case seems very difficult. I think one thing that we could do that would be a good thing to do is to spend some of our efforts trying to show the connection between maintaining a worldwide empire and the lack of services and funding for social uplift, as Dr. King said, poverty programs here at home. It just seems like a glitch or footnote in the budget, $30 million to chase down the Lord's Resistance Army somewhere in a stateless part of Africa. And I'm not saying it's a bad expenditure, but all I'm saying is that the money that goes out for military and military-related purposes is quite a lot of money. And it seems to me that that's something that we can bring up a lot. Another thing that we can do is try to structure our campaign so that there's incremental benefits, as you go. And I think that's a pretty good one. On local issues, I feel that the programs that address the plight of children and youth in the city are probably a good investment of time, because they do bring out the alienation of a lot of people, the destruction of even a modicum of prosperity. If your life is alive, you're poor if you're making $25,000 a year, or if you're making $10,000 a year. But your life at $10,000 a year from family 3 is chaos, where at 25 you might be able to hope to get. And so these things, the conflicts in the schools, I think, are things that we should get involved in. And I think that it might not sound like a peace and justice issue, but land use issues in the underdeveloped parts of Dallas are peace and justice issues as they relate to pollution and displacement of the public and these sort of rip-offs of their land. So those are some of the things that I look forward to trying to work on in Dallas. The other thing is the encouragement of grassroots arts groups, like at the South Dallas Cultural Center and the Theater of Dallas, and some of the groups that try to bring the hope of the arts into your among your oppressed youth, I guess. I taught school for a long time, and the best way I could think about it, to want to go to work and to be effective, was to think of the kids as being an oppressed class, and I was going to do whatever I could that day to lift that burden a little bit, And it was pretty good ethos for a teacher. But if you see them that way, they are that way. It's one thing to graduate from college with a huge debt. That's sort of an injustice, I think. But it's another for the 80% of kids who never graduate from college to try to face this economy without a college degree. So there's a whole lot that we can do in that. But I like to model this church, and I like to model the Peace Center, a church of conscience that supports organizations that are out there doing stuff, both with volunteers and with funds. And then the Peace Center is an organization that, in spite of its many flaws and lack of resources, stays at it, year after year. I want to say one other thing, and that would just take comments about. I think that we need to, the thing that I've been trying to think of, when you work on a local issue, you can usually find a person that is causing your problem or has your solution, and you can at least go in front of their house and sing bawdy Christmas carols or something. Something. You can find them and try to shame them into doing the right thing. And on a lot of the international peace and war issues, that lever for me is hard to find. And I think that I like the strategy of trying to connect with the human rights groups around the world. But I think that we let, I'm not saying people here, of course, but I mean generally, we let our own elected officials off the hook. They don't, like I was trying to say earlier, I feel often that they don't need us. I mean, it might be impossible to dislodge any of the Republican congressmen, no matter if they're as bad as Jim Mancera. I thought he would be one of the most hated men in America after the super committee that instead of right. But anyway, so I think we need to do more with that. And I'm not, the full range of activism, from letter writings and blocking their office is fine with me. But I think we need to put more heat on them and go after them like this, but we we know you have a safe district, but you're supposed to represent us too. You're supposed to represent the whole district. The campaign's over, and maybe something like that. So why don't we, Bill, how do you want to proceed? You want to just go for questions?
Right now, the microphone available to you, so just step up and take the mic and ask questions at any member of the panel or the whole panel if you like.
Or just make a comment.
Or make a comment, not hopefully a long taker.
I'll give it a try. I was a little bit concerned, I guess, and I'm convinced by one of the points that Mr. Fullinwider was making, suggesting that the government doesn't need people. I find difficulties with that because otherwise I don't understand how this systematically lied to us about the wars they've been bringing us into for the last 30 or 40 years. And in the case, they do need some support, and so there's a constant giving.
I think I'm more than just overstating to say that I feel that our role is being marginalized more and more. But I think
I like what you said about patience. We really needed it in working for peace and justice, I think, and the friendship. And John, talking about what you were of things that disturb you, I have been very angered by the voter ID law, the very fact that it passed the legislature, was signed by our governor, and its main purpose is to suppress the vote of people in a free society. That's its purpose. And I'm not so mad that I haven't figured out how to get around the damn thing. And so therefore I need to kind of do that personal work and take a deep breath and figure out how to organize and use it to engage people. And I think it could be pointed toward, you're saying that they don't, these elected officials are in a safe district, they don't need us. Well, they can, one way they can hear from us is through the ballot. And we have the lowest voter participation in the country. Texas does. We have low voter participation among women. We have low voter participation among registered eligible Hispanics. We have low voter participation. Well, we can do something about that. That's right here. We can do something about that. And I think that, like I say, I'm kind of trying to turn it around. And one thing in particular, people have been saying, oh, well, the Department of Justice is going to rule against this and it's not going to happen. Well, the very fact that it passed the legislature, the very fact that 14 other states had a similar law, the fact that this is being done as a strategy to oppress the vote, that's what we need to confront. And so figuring out the way, like, no, they're not going to take my vote, and I'm not going to let them take your vote either. So that's something that we can all work on.
And would you announce the deputizing event for the League of Women Voters will be here in Northaven in March?
Right. On March Saturday, March 17th at 10:30.
I think it's 10 to 12. At least that's the
Parameters, right, from 10 to 10:30. Right, you can become deputized and learn more. And you'll see me here, I'll be going.
Jen, you're absolutely right regarding the fact that election passed and that we're fighting within the Department of Justice. That says so much of where the country is and where we're going, where we're heading. If we don't create a movement that not only exists, that puts forth a progressive agenda to move our voices and our concerns forward. The Human Rights at Home campaign is that. It's a human rights at home campaign. Now, I had the opportunity of visiting with a young activist this afternoon from a different country, and hopefully she'll be using that model as a part of their revolution abroad. But yes, I completely agree. And did want you to know that the Dallas Peace Center is at the C3 table, and several of us are going to band training tomorrow and supporting NAACP, Urban League, and many of the other nonprofit organizations in their GOTV efforts.
Good evening. First of all, I want to thank you. I want to thank Northaven because the 2 occasions or more than 2 occasions have been here. Whatever takes place here has been so empowering. I wish the rest of the churches will emulate what goes on here. The extensive email also that comes out of this place is also very enlightening. And so I was not surprised at how this condition is coming up. I want to thank you, Pastor, for what you mentioned. Paraphrase said, "Hey, Jesus, they like to worship, but don't like to listen to." Growing up in Africa, I often wonder why I prayed to the same God that my oppressors pray to. And it seemed like my prayers are not being answered when he's putting a noose around my neck. You hear often people say everyone is crying out for peace, but nobody is crying out for justice. With our money, and we can complain all we want, we directly or indirectly support violence. Whether we pay for the TV movies where my brother Arnold Schwarzenegger is blowing up everything by the end of the day, I said, what was that movie about? Lord. Or whether again, we talk about violence. I grew up in Africa. Mostly, I prefer my father to spank me from some of the words he had to tell me. I no longer feel the pain of the whipping I got every day for 18 years. But I still hear the voices of every state. Often you hear me say, a harsh word is a sign of a weak mind. So sometimes when some are not powerful enough physically, the word is sharper than the knife. In this church, we don't worship God and say, heaven and earth was created by the word of God. It wasn't physical. So my question is, how do we go non-violent? Again, Pastor, you said so much that Jesus was very radical, and everywhere he went was comfort. Sometimes my father said, trying to tame myself that the words out of my mouth may be perceived as not or too hostile, or whatever, most especially when I'm trying to express to say, you can't understand the pain I feel inside, that it takes even great energy to restrain myself of not shoving my fist at somebody else. But again, whenever you have an occasion like this where you can express, then dialogue takes place. Even the oppressor begin to understand the oppressed. So I wanted to thank you. The question I'd like to ask you is that if all of us really care for peace, really deeply care for peace, why do we choose to do it only when it's convenient and only when supposedly it's tolerated that it is only when it is politically correct, instead of really just listening to each other and doing and asking ourselves in any given situation? Because even in this street I have monitored when I was in Captain, I was somebody walking and nobody stopped to pick them up in a 20-something degree temperature. So my question is, how can we take it past peacemaking of convenience to a peacemaking of commitment to humanity? Thank you.
Let me speak briefly to that. To me, I think Lent is the season of peacemaking. We often, I think, it's a lot easier to get peacemaker to deal with, governmental issues and things like that, because, they don't involve us directly. I mean, we're not looking directly at ourselves. So it's easy, to say, I'm not involved in that, so I can fight that. And Lent is the season where we take things like confession seriously. And confession is much more individual. Where are the places in our own lives the violence is getting into it? And I think that's just the beauty of this season is it doesn't let us off the hook. When we think of Good Friday, we're the ones that say, crucify him, crucify him. That's in our lives. And if we don't confront that we were there that says that we crucify him, then we're always going to displace that violence on something else. And it just takes years and years and years of going through those cycles so that we can have those habits to where we're willing to stand up and we're willing to have courage to face ourselves and to face others. And only if we do it can we get better at it. And so that's where we have to start doing it. Because it doesn't just happen. It begins every day when we take a step. That might, either conflict comes within ourselves or comes within our brother or sister. If we don't do that, then we're never going to get anywhere. And so I think it's really important to see the individual and the communal aspects of violence as well.
Well, I have so many things that I am angry about in our country and in our world that it's hard to know where to start. I do remember a comment that was made one time by a former member of this congregation who is a psychiatrist, Bob Beaver, some of you know him, who said in referring to how healthy families function, he said it's important to learn how to express anger without letting it slop all over other people. And so I'm working on that. But let me tell you, I really picked up on something. He gets it sometimes. That John said about the community. I spent 3 hours this afternoon in a Health and Human Services Coalition meeting discussing the services that aren't being offered to desperate people in our community that our city says they don't have any reason to take care of. I mean, it's not their job. That's what our city manager says, our city council members say. So whose job is it? And if we are citizens of this city and this county, then it seems to me that it's our job to hold our elected officials accountable and to be involved. And that's something we can do something about. We may not be able to do anything about the Washington or what's happening in Syria, but we can do something about what is happening right here that is unjust. And I can tell you, I know I'm just full of it right now, of the injustice that is happening in terms of people who are extremely vulnerable in our community. So I don't know if you want to respond to that, but
I just want to say one thing about it, and that is when the people that you're going to get in solidarity with to make that happen see you fighting for them, or just being with them, supporting them, and then they see you say, we really need to pull the troops out faster, then they remember them, and they say, oh yeah, the people that are for peace are the ones that are out here with us, and that really has a ripple effect. It's like a word of mouth thing that's huge. And so I think that's right. I think you can, it's a moral imperative anyway, but it also helps the raising consciousness about war and peace issues, when they're not usually raised.
thank you for all you do every day.
to their stories. And something that everybody can do is be a friend of them and your own work so that you can listen to them without that being a launching pad for all of your feelings about the war and the government and all those things. We have been advised by all the therapists and all the professionals who are working with us to work with the veterans that the most healing thing they can do is tell their stories. And they're very afraid to tell them to anybody because they believe one of two things will happen. Either we will judge them or we will launch into what a terrible thing they've been involved in. And since the draft, I think we do have a draft now, it's just an economic draft, it's the draft that we had in the city. And I hope that within the next year, we will be able to have a list of people who are willing to be friends with the veteran and have the courage to hear their stories and to stay friends with them after that. Because all these professionals are telling us that in order for them to heal, they have to tell their stories. And they don't have any place to tell them. So I don't know if you can respond to that, I don't know if people want to get involved in that, I don't know what to say except for that. But that has to happen from what we're learning. And the only other thing I want to add is I'm going to be at the end of March working for 3 days and 2 nights with veterans at the night shelter in Fort Worth. They have 62 designated beds for veterans, and they're full. And now for them. So I don't want to take the time tonight, but I just am afraid we won't be here next time. And I don't want to miss a chance to say we really, one-on-one, can do a lot to affect whether or not we go to war again by telling the stories of the people who've been.
Thank you for sharing that. I was hoping that Leslie was still in the room, but she obviously had to slip out. She works with Koch, Leslie Harris, and also very closely with the Veterans for Peace, and as well as the Under the Hood project in Fort Hood. So we are looking forward to engaging and supporting you in these initiatives, so please keep us posted. Thank you.
Well, so much to be angry about so little time. I don't know where to start. But, you know, I was watching the Republican debate last night, and these two candidates that hold themselves up to be such great Catholics, you know. But when it comes to war and peace, it's all bets are off. And I always remind my Catholic friends that are so, I think I'm some kind of communist because I'm a Methodist in our position on abortion, which other position is really just good, you know, myself. I don't want to get off on that. But I always remind them that, you know, I think it was Pope John Paul II who said war is obsolete. I mean, this was a very anti-war Pope, and a lot of Catholics. I mean, whatever problems you might have with the Catholic Church and Vatican, they are at least consistent about the sanctity of life. They're against torture, they're against the death penalty, they're against war, needless wars, you know, and the whole Catholic tradition back to Augustine was, you know, the just war theory, which is pretty close to being just outright pessimism, really. So, I don't know, it's just watching it, I don't know why I watch these debates, where they get me to they messed up my lid, and so peaceful, and said, what time of God, and then, well, just got curious, and I had a dream, and all of them said, well, no, I mean, and just for the close, I'm a United Methodist ordained deacon, but I serve as a chaplain at Leather Hospital. And so as a pastor, you know, we're right. Peacemakers, as peacemakers, we're right. We're on the right side here, you know. I mean, any way you cut and slice and dice, and Jesus Christ Jesus, our Lord and Savior, was a pastor. And, you know, people can equivocate on all that all they want. They can pull sections out of the Bible as, you know, this Lord stuff and all that stuff, and they all do misinterpretations, but we're right. So just be brave, be courageous in speaking out, because we're right at the end of the day.
Thank you.
This would be a good strategy, actually. We get time like on PBS or maybe on MSNBC where you know you've got people watching the debates, strictly to throw their shoes at the TV. And right after, you know, when they go for a break, then you come on with the Dallas Peace Center wants you to contradict these fools. You know, please call. It'd be a good pledge drive there. We could just invite Santor to come and dress, you know, a peace audience, and we'd probably really raise a lot of money by that.
I don't even know what to say.
It's counterintuitive, but I'm just saying.
We have that problem lots of times. So we can cut the audio, but
As I was reflecting and listening, anger's been named, and all of us here feel anger. I don't think we would be here if we hadn't felt that deep within inside. And listening to the campaign, I choose not to anymore as much as possible. One of the things that for me, as I watched, having done church work most of my adult life, know what can happen when religious systems or any system gets terribly anxious. Lots of damage can be done. In post 9/11, what I saw happening in our society was this incredible, overwhelming sense of anxiety that's right across the nation. No matter what people were saying about shopping where they would feel better, anxiety was just prevalent. So what happens for me is, as I deal with people each day, I hear the anger expressed, right, left, moderates, there are any such thing. And I don't know what to do and have no answers when it seems as if the nation has become chronically anxious and that people in the corporate business that becomes the media business are making good money off of our anxiety. And those who sell arms are making good money off of our anxiety. And campaigns are being waged based on that anxiety and keeping it going. And so that seems to me to be the most difficult challenge, is how we begin to invite people to push past the reptilian, to think, can we actually have a conversation with a vision that's different than killing everything and everybody, who reminds us that we're anxious and don't know what to do about it.
yeah, I think you nailed something really important. And there's definitely a strong correlation between fear and violence. And something that's a country and a world only once. When, you know, after 9/11, when you have all the different warnings about, you know, what's the terrorist threat today, it's a way to keep us in perpetual fear, so they can be in perpetual war and, you know, infringe upon human rights. And so I mean, the best way to counter that is hope. I mean, hope is to me the opposite of fear. I people have hope. Those little anxieties seem to fade away. So I mean, what we offer the world, I think, just continue to offer hope.
Pastor, I agree, that was well said, and no question about it, that we are anxiety driven, and you hit the nail on the head, so to speak, in a not so non-violent term. But you know, we do have to begin to speak visions and speak compassion, and to speak empathy, and to speak forgiveness, and to begin to speak friendship. And I would like to remind everyone, if you haven't picked up the flyer, we're bringing Rabbi Michael Lerner to town on March 15th. And that is the basis of his dialogue, the need for us to walk in forgiveness and generosity and kindness as a way of healing this world. and we've got to begin to put forth a different narrative other than the one that's been put forth. Okay.
One of the things that helps me to sleep at night, and this may seem like a trivial question, but I'm really curious about. What I've noticed, I have a 16-year-old granddaughter, and she is very into peace symbols. And that, I think hers comes from a very honest understanding of what that means, because she's a member of the Lord's church and has been inspired by God, whatever you want to call it. And, you know, notice some of the things that we do as well. But I see at the mall, and I see on the children, and on their backpacks, and on their t-shirts, all these symbols of peace. And yet, when I talk to people outside this church, I don't know if it's me or what, but most of the, you know, the masseuse, the doctor, the person at the store, the relative, they are very conservative and not liberal at all. And I'm wondering, is there a change in this young generation that is sincere, or is this just some bad that really they don't understand or doesn't mean anything to them? I thought maybe that you people might have some on that.
I taught school for 15 years at an alternative high school in Dallas, and the kids that I worked with, they were natural born rebels, but they really didn't have any politics at all. And these were mainly black and Latino kids, so we would teach the civil rights movement or the Latino civil rights movement, and this was really new to them. I mean, Martin Luther King to most of my students was like George Washington in the cherry tree. I mean, they'd say, hey, do you talking about like back in slavery time with Martin Luther King? And then just the whole narrative just conflated in this one thing. And so I think that, picking up on what Kelli said, I think we could, do more with that, with showing people that the things we're advocating is what caused progress so far, and that people who felt really down on their luck, like Woody Guthrie used to say, actually did make a big change in the country, by joining together or whatever, joining their union or whatever. And so I think that, and so they didn't wear those styles, but my son and daughter do, and a lot of their friends do, and I welcome it as a fashion thing. I mean, one day they might ask me, hey, what's this? Or my students would go, hey, peace, man, when they see me, and I'd say, well, it's still a good idea, what are you proposing, And so to pick up that history again would be good. There was a school in Austin called the Bread and Roses School when I was young as a student, and they do stuff like this, but they make it more like 5 weeks. Every Wednesday night they have like something on nonviolence or something like that, and a lot of the students would go to it, and they might be there for a variety of reasons. But I think it would be good to lift up peace and fighting the power, so to speak, as a cool thing to do again. And I think a lot of kids do get into it when they see the opportunity.
Thank you for your coming here tonight and inspiring us and making us angry, stirring our anxieties, but having dialogue about it is very important. I like what you said about peace is not avoiding conflict, but it's facing it so that you can have reconciliation. That was very, very helpful. And I think a lot of what we're trying to figure out is how peace and justice go together. And with the view of peace is avoiding conflict, it doesn't. So thank you for that. One of the conundrums or anxieties I guess I have is most of my friends, they don't keep up with what's going on in our community, in our nation, in the world, but yet they speak out like they are fully informed. And I think that they've given over their thinking to the pundits and whatever's being hashed out on television, and it really disturbs me because what's an education for except for being able to come to your own conclusion, your own informed position, and you just don't say, I'm on this side, I'm on this side. You've got to know both sides. And I think when you talk about being a moderate, I don't think it's necessarily whether you're more socially oriented this way or that way. I think it's a matter of being a considered opinion, to know both sides, to be able to say, okay, there are these sides, but in order to fully come to what our society wants, we have to take XYZ stance. And you just have to know. And I think so many people, and it disturbs me that they are not, they don't care, they don't vote, but except for on the big national scene, for president or, they don't care about the Congress, they don't write, they don't petition, they don't have an opinion at all. Oh, that's some friend. What do you think about that? What? I don't know anything about that. Okay, thank you.
Well, that's one thing. Sometimes you confront that, but you're more often confronting someone who's just in an alienated, apathetic situation either because of a surfeit of leisure maybe, or the opposite, deprivation to make you turn inward, So it's a real struggle when you're trying to find your yes vote, so to speak, or spread a message. But one thing that we do often on the left is we say, well, it's really more complicated than that. So I think I like it. I wish I like hope and change. That was a good one. That was easy to take to the precinct, and so I think simple messages are good.
Bill Maxwell, First Unitarian Church, long time peace activist. And I just wanted to say some things about activism. Jan Sanders is my favorite peace activist. About most of what I've learned about how to be effective or how to reach out, I learned from Jan. I noticed in this flyer, this handout today, one moment the sheet that said faith in politics, number 4 and number 10, I want to point out because basically these two items point out that politics is unavoidable and that our silence is a vote in support of the status quo or whatever. So we're being reminded that it's our job to speak out, to say what's true for us in the face of what appear to be overwhelming odds. And so to not do that, I think that's the only way to dissipate the anger that or frustration that we feel. So that's something that we can do. And so I encourage that. And it says we must take a position and act. So now that I'm sort of semi-retired, and I get hundreds of emails, I get a lot of them asking me to look at an issue and maybe put my voice behind it. I didn't used to have time to do this, and I'm starting to take those apart. So I sit down and actually read out the petition and what this issue is, and then I stop and click on it and vote, and I send it on to some friends that I know that are more like-minded. Now I'm suggesting that people do that much to be, that's a positive step. And it really matters. And so it's at least being depressed or angry or wringing our hands. So I invite people to step up and take some time. You care about these things, I know you do, that's why you're here. So So let's put a little bit of time into it and do that kind of thing. So that's what I wanted to say. I encourage you to become activists, in fact. And through some oversight, I wasn't invited to be on the panel tonight.
You come back to order.
They said they couldn't even anyone else.
Thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. I want to thank Pastor Fulton. For a Muslim, I want to say that this church has been a home for me. I've not been to any other church other than I've come to this church. Thank everybody here and my friends that are part of this congregation. I believe in me feeling home anytime I'm here. And I've been coming here for a long time now. John, I appreciate the statistics you gave to us, the misinformation and the disinformation that what speaks our statistics can be very telling, along with the general understanding of most American people about the misleading information they have in their minds about how Iraq was one time an existential threat to this nation, and Afghanistan is an existential threat to this nation. With the last time you talked about one of the poorest countries in the world, I mean, they rank one at the bottom, I think they're like above Somalia and one North African country. And how can that country pose a threat, an existential threat to this nation? It's really mind-boggling. But if you take into consideration this poll I read today on Dr. Ron Cole, who's a professor in the East Studies at the University of Michigan and Harvard here, his daily blog is one of the preeminent scholars of the Middle East on the Iraq War. He wrote something really interesting. He says, most Americans believe that human beings and dinosaurs coexisted. I find that baffling. I know there's nobody here that believes that, right?
I changed my mind.
It's stunning. It's absolutely stunning. I want to thank the Dallas Peace Center, the new leadership of the Dallas Peace Center, and some of our old colleagues here that have been involved in this peace and justice movement in North Texas. I think in the years from mid-1990s when I got involved with the Peace Center around the sanctions against the Iraq issue back in the mid-90s, amazing work that all of my friends are pointing to. You know who you are. The great work we did for the people of Iraq. It was absolutely beautiful. Iraq was under sanctions. The U.S. government was instigating and backing into the sanctions to the hilt, where 5,000 Iraqi children were dying every month because of contaminated drinking water, because chlorine was not allowed to be imported, not allowed into the country, because chlorine, according to the UN and its US backers, was a dual utility substance that could be used for. And in that period, folks that are sitting in this room worked with the Veterans for Peace, a national organization, and an organization inside Iraq called Life for Relief and Development, worked through the bureaucracy of the U.S. government, the United Nations, and the Iraqi government, and rebuilt 6 water plants that provided clean drinking water to the Iraqi people. This was the Dallas Peace Center in the 1990s and early 2000s. I want you publicly, my gratitude to you for doing that for the Iraqi people. Thank you very much. God bless you for having that sort of a vision and that sort of risk-taking. We took a big risk with this stuff because in today's time, the consequences of that kind of behavior with the new material support clause of the federal government, which continues to overreach into the affairs of the American people, is stunning. And at that time, Dr. Speaker was doing this kind of work. Peace and justice work is a long road, and I'm in awe of people who have been doing this. My colleagues here who are doing much longer than I have. They have inspired me to do this work in so many ways. And it bears fruit. You just have to hang in there long enough. Sometimes it is possible to see that your efforts are bringing about some change. I have witnessed that myself, especially with the people here. At one time, we were trying to raise the awareness about the suffering of the Iraqi people, Iraqi children, particularly, and people used to spit on us. We've been spit on, right? Holding banners downtown, people walk by and say, children are dying, and they would spit on us and say, one man said, this is a good way to control the world's population. I mean, the sensitivity was just mind-boggling. And talk about patience and loving those people when they're spitting on you. It changed me because I'm not more saved, but it changed. The process changed me, and because of people like you, I was changed by that. So it's a long road we have seen, and a few years went down the road, and the same people who were critics or detractors, people who were arguing it was like a good idea that there are actual transactions, were holding up signs. When we were talking about deploying American troops in Iraq, we're holding up signs saying, we are there for the sake of Iraqi children, our detractors, our critics. So that was like a sea change. You couldn't believe it, The same people who were criticizing us before, saying it's a good thing for Iraqi children, were holding up signs that said, we should not withdraw U.S. troops, we're going to protect the Iraqi children. So hang in there long enough, don't despair. It's a long road. It's a hard road. We have small victories along the road. But I think that's where our faith comes in. We have to believe in the unseen, something we cannot touch and feel or predict it will happen. But we have to just be able to hang in there. And I learned that from all of you. Thank you very much.
We want to hear Charles act, and I'm going to be certainly a handy for this moment. We go from 7 to 8:45. We're going to be faithful at the time. So if you'd like to hear what Charles has to say, either call or question, and then we will adjourn. Those who bought refreshments are going to be upset with us if we don't get out there and have some little questions. Let's move out there in just a moment.
I'll be quick. John, I taught high school for 30 years, and then I went to work as a union organizer where I was in the schools every day. And if there is any hope for humanity, it's high school kids. They are hardwired justice seekers. They are hardwired to look for fairness and to see unfairness. All we have to do is give them the inspiration and the information so that they can take those issues and run with them. Because I think our Maker did us a great favor in setting teenagers among us to keep us honest.
That's why I decided to stay young and handsome my whole life.
We had a talk show, my husband and I, we come from a media background. It is called Teen Night Talk Show. And we brought kids together from 10 to 18 years of age. And you would be literally amazed at the subjects that these young people would take on, from the crisis in Uganda to, I asked them, I said, would you do a story on racism? They said, no, Ms. Obazee, we can't do that. But we're going to do a story on discrimination. They took it from sex to age to religion to ethnicity, and they are amazing. I had asked as one time on the radio station, the conversations were so deep and profound, they thought that I was scripting for these young people. And the truth of the matter was, is they would choose their subject, their topic. We would meet together on a conference call on Friday. I would bring them in the studio on Saturday, and what they produced was just amazing. Couldn't agree with you more.
I think one of the things that keeps me going, peace and justice, is just to remember that this is God's agenda. This is not the agenda of just liberal and progressive people in the church as far as the Christian church is concerned. It's God's agenda for the world and for all of us. So I try to keep that in mind and follow that path with the help of many, many friends who are peacemaker mentors for me through the years. We do thank you so much for coming tonight. Please think about coming if you possibly can on March for our next Faith Voices on Justice. Now we will adjourn to the atrium and enjoy the refreshments. Thank you for coming.